All right, welcome in. It is a Monday evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich, and happy Labor Day to everybody out there who's laboring like James and I are here in the Weather Center / Stream Center, Weather Impact Studio, whatever we're going to call it today. But we are talking Labor Day. A lot happening, actually. We've got, it's kind of weird that Labor Day falls on exactly September 1st, which is the meteorological beginning of autumn. So we're changing seasons, and yes, that is the thing we're going to talk about with Tim. This always seems to be very controversial with the public because for whatever reason, we were raised on astronomical seasons. They're on calendars. No one told you about the meteorological seasons, which aren't new, by the way, since records have been kept since 1850. That's the way records for weather and climate have been kept. So we'll talk about that. But let's focus on the good stuff because it is beautiful. It is the first day of autumn meteorologically. It looks amazing out there. I mean, just look at these views. It's just, you can't ask for a better day like this with no humidity, as my computer decides to lock me out real quick. So I'll have to log back in real quickly, but we'll just gaze at those views because
logging in only takes 2 or 3 minutes. So
why did my computer go to sleep so quick? It's like it's on Labor Day holiday as well. So yeah, the beautiful views out there. I mean, look at the blue skies. To me, that's the biggest thing I noticed looking outside today, is how crystal clear and blue the skies are. That's always a good sign that the humidity is low because haze in and of itself can form when we have humidity out there, especially kind of the muggy days. The dew points today are in the 40s basically, which I'll show you here in a minute. I'll try to play my show now that it actually let me back in.
It's a very nice day to travel too.
Yes.
If you're coming back from a holiday break, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to be traveling right now because there's nobody on the roads. And my family just got back from Houston. They were down there visiting family, and they flew in this morning, had little trouble. So let's look back at August now that we can actually put it in the record books. Make no bones about it, August 2025 was a cool August. It was our 32nd coolest, and I know that seems weird, but yeah, it wasn't the coolest all time. We've had some stretches in there where it was really cool, but overall, 32nd coolest. But it was the coolest in Charlotte since 2013. In fact, it tied with 2013 on that list. 2.5 degrees below average. We had that heat in the middle of the month. That's when we got to 94. But the end of the month, we got that nice dry air. And look at that, 59. was our lowest. And the rainfall, yeah, we got a ton of rain, but it all happened in the first 2 weeks. It really has not rained in the past 2 weeks. We actually could use some rain. Look at these temperatures. I mean, this is just chef's kiss. I mean, it is unbelievable. Upper 70s, near 80. We got mid 60s in the mountains. And look at the dew points. Dew points this low, you get that nice reverse heat index. It feels cooler than the actual air temperature. And so that's why it feels so good out there right now. The high today, 81, the low 58. Nowhere near the records, but also nowhere near our averages, which are 86 and 67. So sunrise just before 7 a.m. now. Tonight, comfortable. This is going to be one of those nights where I think if you had a fire pit going, it would be a good night because mid-50s, it's going to be crisp and cool in the morning when you wake up tomorrow for your Tuesday morning. So off to school and back to work for everybody should be very comfortable. There are some showers over in western part of the state, southwestern North Carolina, eastern Tennessee. There's kind of a little disturbance rotating through there. But for us, we're pretty high and dry when you look at the wider view. We do have a cold front that could approach on Saturday, which we'll talk about the little heat that's going to build ahead. But tomorrow, if you love today, tomorrow equally as nice, back up around 80 degrees. Surface map kind of shows you our future cast. Notice no big storm systems heading our way. The flow is still generally out of the northwest. But right there, that's a cold front that we're going to keep an eye on for Thursday into Saturday, because this cold front is going to be right here. I'll use my arrow. You see it right there. That cold front is probably going to get stuck up there, and that's going to lead to some pretty hot and humid weather ahead of it. But if the front gets a little push, we might see it get pushed through the area and could be much cooler. But keep an eye on that. Saturday's a big transition day. Dew points stay relatively low until we get to that Thursday front to the northwest, and then they could hover in the 60s. So I wouldn't call it muggy, but it's certainly going to be more humid than what we just experienced. And as I mentioned, we could use some rain. 5-day rainfall forecast is not amounting to much. So if your lawn is drying out and your garden's drying out, you're going to have to do some irrigation. And we're getting to that point where people are going to start aerating and overseeding their lawns here pretty soon. So people are going to want to see some rainfall without too much heavy rain. We got to talk about the tropics. The other thing about the calendar flipping to September is this is the peak of hurricane season. The peak day is September 10th. So we are right in the core of the season. And we've had a lull. It's been quiet for the last couple of weeks. And remember, we had a lull like this last year in August and into early September. And then like the middle of the month, something happened. We had this switch go off, and the Atlanta got real active. And unfortunately, one of those storms ended up being Helene. And then we had Milton. And it got really active there for a while. I suspect we'll see something very similar happen this September. But that's the only system, that tropical wave, 50% chance in the next 7 days. So no threats to the U.S. Interesting upper level pattern. Kind of looks like it is late fall. We're seeing a dip in the jet stream come down from the Great Lakes. That keeps us cool. But then Saturday, that little area of high pressure off the East Coast that we call the Bermuda High tries to back up a little bit on us. So we're going to see some heat try to nose into the southeast, especially if there's a cold front stuck just to our northwest, and that will likely keep us kind of on the toasty side. So the forecast, we'll get right to the 7-day here. Temperatures could approach 90. I knew I'd jinx it by saying we were done with the 90s. We've got a chance 2 days really this week, Friday and Saturday. Now, it's all going to hinge on that front. If that front somehow gets down here quicker, pushes out, then we could actually see some much cooler weather than this. But if it stays to the northwest, we could get stuck kind of on the hot side. And we'll go 10 days in the future here and show you once that front does clear us sometime this weekend, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, we are going to be much cooler next week with temperatures only in the upper 70s to near 80 degrees. So kind of a little bit of a break from the heat and humidity. So Tim Buckley is going to be joining me here momentarily. And one of the hot topics today is going to be this, the start of meteorological fall. Why does it differ than the astronomical ones? Why does your calendar lie to you and tell you the official start is the 22nd? It doesn't lie to you, but it's telling you something completely different that has nothing to do with weather and climate. We'll dive into that. Plus, we'll look back at August, and we'll talk about a whole bunch of things as we're now getting into the fall season and obviously the tropics. But we've got to go to break here. We'll be coming up here in about 2 minutes, and Tim will join me from WFMY. Maybe we'll talk a little college football, which kicked off this weekend and still going on tonight. Stay tuned. who joins me from WFMY.
Here we
Tim,
are.
big day. It's the first day of September, first day of meteorological fall. It's Labor Day. I mean, there's a lot going on for September 1st. It's kind of wild.
There's a lot going on, and there's also a way you could look at it where there's very little going on. Just depending on the weather perspective, right? It's not that busy, but we still have narrative and cooling things that have been going on, and we're kind of wrapping up. Well, we're not even wrapping up. We're just continuing this stretch of cooler weather that it feels like we've been talking about already for a long time.
Yeah, so I know you pulled some of your numbers, and we looked back at August here in the Charlotte area, and we ended up being the 32nd coolest, which, I mean, seems kind of, not that cool, but it was the coolest since 2013. So it had been a minute since we'd seen an August like this, and it certainly was wet. But what's interesting to me is I looked at the summer data today, and June and July we were on pace for the hottest summer on record, and then August hit, and it bumped us from number 1 to number 9 for hottest summers on record. So that's how much of an impact that cool August had on us. It knocked us down 8 spots from number 1 hottest to 9th hottest, which is crazy. It was still a little warmer than last summer here in the Charlotte area, at least. What happened with you guys in August?
Yeah, that's impressive. So I've got our August numbers pulled up here. We actually had a pretty impressive one. We were our 8th coolest August on record. So around here up in Greensboro, our records go back to 1903, so pretty far. That's pretty significant. So 8th coolest August overall. And it's actually the coolest since 1992, which, again, that doesn't sound like that long ago, but we need to remember that's 30 years ago plus now. Also, we still only had one 90-degree day for the whole month, which is impressive. And I was just pulling this stat, too. We only had, Brad, 8 days in the whole month that were 85 or higher.
Wow.
And that's
really
by
cool.
far the rarest one, too. So very unusual. And a lot of people ask me, is there a cloudy record for the month? I wasn't able to verify, is the most cloudy or not, but I can tell you there were 12 days that verified as basically overcast for August, and that's pretty impressive to me for sure.
Yeah.
Our summer overall basically ended up being average, so we were our 25th warmest summer, so not that impressive up here.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, the overcasting is something you just don't normally see in the summer because usually just the days are so long and you have so much mixing and heating that it's hard to lock in overcast skies for that length of time. That's impressive, and I think the lack of 90s is really impressive. That having only one in August, that is really, really something. We had that.
And Raleigh was the same.
Yeah. I mean, for Raleigh, and people don't know Raleigh, we know because we watched kind of the trend. Raleigh's a really hot spot. It's kind of in that sweet spot, coastal plain. It's an urban center. You go between Raleigh down to like the Fayetteville area, that kind of almost in the coastal plain, but quite not. That's like a hot belt in the Carolinas when you go out that way. It just gets really toasty in the summer. And for them to be cool, that is very, very impressive. So I think a lot of people will remember this August for a long time because of how cool it was.
I think so too, and it's funny. A lot of times with summer, we think of just it's which is the hottest one. To me, the summer is always hot.
Yeah.
So having a cooler month is more memorable. I don't think I'm going to remember this July, for example, because again, it was hot. It was very hot.
Yeah.
One of the hottest. But again, we have so many of those that it's very unusual to have a month that, hey, this wasn't so bad. And the early fall, which kind of looks to continue, is memorable too.
Yeah, which I'm somewhat excited for because I do think we've had, like you said, this has not been like a one and done thing. It's been cool for the last week of August, and now we're starting pretty much the first week of September on the same note. I think we're going to see some color change early in the mountains this year because of this cool snap, because we've had consistent nights in the 40s last week, and we're probably going to see a couple more tonight and tomorrow. So I'll be curious to see if some of the higher elevations start to see an early change this year. And at least for the higher elevations, we might see mid to late September some colors start to pop up there.
That's going to be something to look at for sure. We'll be checking with our buddies up that way, the Parkway Colors crew and Explore Fall and all those guys. They're going to be busy. This is their Super Bowl the next couple of weeks to let folks in the Piedmont know when to get up there. And again, you should get up there, especially this year. Go, go, go. The parkway's open like 85 miles now from Asheville southward continuously, so that's a good place that you could check out. But it seems like right now the summer green is holding steady, but you wouldn't expect things to change until late September at the earliest. But like you're saying, Brad, the highest of high elevations, maybe there is that earlier change, because people always ask about the summer weather. A lot of times it's these fall months, which we're starting now. When do you get those cool nights? Well, we've already got them. And if they keep on happening, that'll bring that color out.
Yeah, and ironically, the way that the leaves change so vividly is, like you mentioned, cool nights but warm, dry days. So kind of like the pattern we're in right now, we've got like the ideal setup to get those sugars to start releasing. That's a beautiful view. We're looking at Blowing Rock right now from resort cams. You even see a nice sundog at the top of the screen there. That's pretty cool. They got a nice Cirrus deck up there today, and so seeing some great views. So let's approach this subject, because I don't know about you, but I feel like every time I bring up the meteorological and climatological seasons, there's a little bit of a pushback from the public about my calendar says September 22nd. And while I totally get that, right? That's astronomical. But these are really important, Tim, because you're like me. We love numbers. We love climate data. I'm always fascinated by stats. So if you're a stats person and you keep track of these records for fall, winter, spring, and all these seasons, you have to pay attention to the meteorological seasons, because today's high and low does not count in the summer numbers, right? It now counts for fall. So we are technically, for record-keeping purposes and weather purposes, in the month of fall. And I'm going to show my graphic first and you show yours, but fall is a huge transition season, as we know. From September 1st to the end of November, we go from an average high of 86 to an average low of average high of 58. That's a pretty dramatic change. And even in September, for Charlotte at least, the average high drops almost 10 degrees from the beginning of the month to the end. So September, I know people think it does get hot, and it does, but it's usually the first half of the month. Things do start to cool down pretty quickly as you get later and later in the month. Let's look at your numbers, Tim, because they're not quite as dramatic, but it's pretty dramatic even in Greensboro.
Yeah, for sure. And, the whole reason that we do the record keeping the way that we do, the hottest 3 months of the year do not include September. It's June, July, and August. June is hotter than September. And so that's why it's part of our summer weather keeping. Same reason for December in the winter weather keeping, even though it's technically only has 10 days or so at the end. So that's why we do these things. It better captures the warmest time of the year, better captures the coolest time of the year. And fall and spring, they're not really so much seasons as summer and winter are. They're really just big transitions. So you think about it almost like you go to Carowinds, right? You go up a hill, you go down, then you go up again, you go on that big one that makes you feel all sick. But you're going up and down. It's not a steady downturn like we show on the normals. That's smoothed out. But fall is a big decline with a lot of bumps in the road. Spring is a big incline with a lot of bumps in the road. And it's all due to either gaining a lot of daylight or losing a lot of daylight. And in this case, we're losing a lot of daylight, which is our heat source. And so it will cool down, but it won't be a steady process.
So I always like showing this when I explain this. So this is the temperature curve for Charlotte. And as you correctly mentioned, Tim, when you think about it like you just said it, like the 3 warmest months, June, July, August, and the 3 coldest months, once you separate those 3 and then you have the transition season, it makes sense that we would have the seasons based on that calendar, because that lines up with the temperature curve. And you also mentioned, too, fall. I kind of laugh because you'll see it all over social media, the 15 seasons of the Carolinas. We got false fall and all these things. But the funny thing about, like you said, fall and spring, the only thing that's normal about those seasons is that the weather isn't consistent. If it was consistent, I would be worried, because they are. You get a little bit of – it's winter and summer literally fighting it out, and so you're going to get some of that in the same week. So that's kind of the calling card of this season, right? It's supposed to be all over the place.
I had a meteorology professor back in school, Dr. John Neese. He hated the word normal. He would not use it. He much preferred averages. These are your temperature averages, especially when you get into these seasons. He's like, there's no such thing as normal. That's the average. We're just going to combine it all and divide it. But there's some truth to that, because really this time of year, you look at the records, Brad, it's always interesting to me in
Oh,
September
yeah.
or March, for example. You can have record highs in the 90s or even close to 100, and your record lows are in the 40s, too. So there's a big spread.
Yeah, so I know I saw you post your September graphic by the numbers, and I put mine together. And when I was doing this, I thought of that, Tim, because our all-time record high in the month of September is 104, but our all-time record low is 38. So to have 104 and 38 happen in the same month at some point tells you how wild September can be. So, yeah, let's look at your numbers first, because yours are pretty crazy too. 135, that's a huge swing.
And that gives me a good idea for a graphic, Brad. Like if you were to look at every month of the year, like take the extreme variance. So for September, 100 to 35, that would be a 65-degree spread, right? Like all time. What months would have the biggest variance and which ones would have the lowest? It would probably be those summer months that have the lowest, but that's for another day. Maybe tomorrow we'll do that.
Well, so it's
but
funny
for
you say
Greensboro,
that.
anyway, the hottest we've ever been. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't have the months broken down, but I do have a graphic for seasons, because I thought you and I think a lot alike. So I tried to use this to explain what's the most extreme season. And so what I did is, like you said, I took the hottest and coolest it's been in every season and the difference. So spring is the most extreme season in our area, at least Charlotte, 94-degree spread from the hottest and coolest.
Yeah.
Fall is second at 93. Winter is third at 87. In summer, there's only a 59-degree spread from the all-time hottest and coolest temperature. So that really does, and I think it would be fascinating, like you said, to do this by the months, because then you could really see like how wild some of these months can be.
Yeah, it makes sense, because to have extreme temperatures, you would want to have very little moisture in the air, but also still have a pretty powerful heat source. So if you have your sun that's kind of, able to heat you up and cool you down and that sort of thing, you can get that in those months. Summertime, just too much humidity to do too much with it.
Yeah.
So,
So let's go back to your
Every 12
September
months,
numbers. I want to see your September numbers again. So,
Okay, so for us, the hottest is 100 on the nose back in 1954.
same year for us. Yep.
We've never got to freezing, but we got close, 35 in 1942. The wettest month was a bit over 7 inches, which I thought it would have been a little more, 1947. I might have to double check that. And we do lose about an hour of daylight. I like to put that on this graphic just because it helps to tell the story of why you're losing about 10 degrees off of your average highs and lows over the month.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. All right, so let's look at Charlotte. We got the same graphic. I love doing this. So for Charlotte, 104 in 1954, the same year as you guys. That was a hot August and September in 1954. There's a lot of records from that. Our coolest was in 1888, though, 38, and that was at the end of the month. It was, I think, the last day of the month. But our averages go from 86 to 79 for highs, 67 to 58. And we don't lose quite as much daylight as you, but pretty close, about 62 minutes of daylight. What I think is more interesting is, like, by the end of the month, you are close to almost the same sunrise and sunset time, so that's kind of interesting. And the driest year, which I thought was interesting too, is back in that same hot September of 1954 when it was 104, we only had 2/100ths of an inch of rain the entire month of September. That is really, really dry. And to think about it, this is the tropics season. We're getting in the peak of the hurricane season, and we tend to get cold fronts. So for us not to get any rain in that September like that, that must have been one giant heat dome over the southeast back in 1954.
But there's a lot of rainfall variability, right, when it comes to, like you said, it's very tropical dependent. So if you have a tropical season that's just, for whatever reason, not that active in September, or they're not landfalling, there's good and bad things to tropical landfalls. You obviously don't want hurricanes to come in and cause lots of damage, but it really is part of our climate. We're supposed to get rainfall from hurricanes and tropical storms. And a lot of that happens in September or October or August. So if you don't get them, you can usually get into a drought.
Yeah, I saw a study, and I can't remember who did it, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. It was a university somewhere in the Carolinas. It might have been Eastern Carolina, but I think they said that the Carolinas, like 31 or 32% of our annual rainfall can be attributed to tropical systems. And so that tells you how important those are. We don't want a direct impact. But yeah, the rainfall from a tropical system is part of our climate here. And so not getting them can be a big deal. So let's talk about the tropics, because not only is it September 1st, the beginning of meteorological fall, it's also the beginning and really the peak of hurricane season, Tim. And we're in another one of these weird lulls. We had one of these last year about this time, but there's signs that things could start stirring by the middle of the month again.
Yeah, it's been very quiet ever since Aaron, and I guess we had Fernan for a couple of days.
We barely even knew.
Interesting when it's not close. Right. But in any case, things probably do start to heat up at least a little bit more. Some of the tools that we look at, those ensemble models that start to plot where some lows might be going, over the next 2 weeks, they have a lot more coming a little bit closer. And like you're showing on this graphic here, the Hurricane Center is highlighting one area of the ocean pretty far away, but at least a 50-50 shot of getting a tropical storm by the end of the week. And I don't know about you, I tend to think that probably will form into Gabrielle. And this time of year, September, where can the storms form? Basically everywhere.
Yes. Yeah, I think last year a lot of people, I don't know what it was, it's just people weren't paying attention, but people were mystified by storms forming in the Gulf or near Central America and then moving northeast towards us, like what happened with Helene. But that's actually that's a pretty prime spot for storms to form this time of year. I think everyone just thinks they come across the entire Atlantic, but that's a great graphic because it really does show, like, pretty much you can get development almost anywhere now that you're in September. I guess that's why it is the peak of the season. So, yeah, you got to be on guard because sometimes you can get something closer to home to bubble up on you and form real quick as we get in. But so what are your thoughts going into September? I mean, the 10th is the peak. Do you think we're going to get active again? The steering currents are in our favor right now, but I have a sneaky suspicion we might see that switch flip like we did last year, Tim.
Yeah, I have a hard time imagining we'd get out of the month without too many stressors. So I think we probably have a couple that we might have to stress about a little bit. I do wonder, I think it's interesting, the Gulf hasn't really been touched all that much this year. Aaron really worked over the Atlantic pretty good, so but it's been some time since then too. It'll be interesting to see, where they pop up, but I'm sure we'll have more storms. There's so much time left to go.
Long ways to go. And by the way, everybody, the peak day is actually September 10th. So that's the statistical peak. So we're at the mountaintop now. That means we've got a long ways on the downhill side. And there's a secondary peak in early to mid-October, too, as well. So we've got a long ways to go. Hopefully, knock on wood, we don't have anything to talk about for a while. Yes. Thanks, Tim. Enjoy the rest of your Labor Day evening. We're going to labor away here. And everybody else, thanks for watching tonight. Colin's coming up next.